Is this your computer here?
No. Practically. That's the dead man walking.
That's where they had asked us.
Is there glass ringing or something out in the foyer? Ladies and gentlemen, if I can ask you to take your seats, and you're doing just what you should be doing, which is looking at designs and models, but we'd like to get started with the more formal program as our last guests join us from the break. Welcome to the Robert L.B. Tobin Director-Designer Showcase. This is the second year of the showcase, and we are so thrilled to bring it back on a biannual basis. The last one, the first of our Director-Designer Showcases, was a huge success. We know that all four of the Director-Designer teams secured work, if not doing the very productions that they showed us, doing other productions because general directors and artistic directors who met them were so impressed with their talent. So we were able to bring to your attention directors and designers of real merit. You'll hear more about the program from Diane Wondisford of the Opera America Board, who chaired the adjudicatory panel of this year's Tobin round, and just has so much to say about the selection process and the quality of the four winning teams that you'll meet today. I did want to introduce, before we get underway formally, from the board of the Tobin Theatre Arts Fund, Mel Weingart. The Tobin Theater Arts Fund is dedicated to bringing higher recognition to the art of theater design through exhibitions and lectures. The fund is also committed to the development and exhibition of the creativity of young designers who will carry the art form of theater design forward for future generations. We are so grateful to Mel and to the Tobin Theater Arts Fund for supporting the Director-Designer Showcase. It enables us to continue biannually to review the work of some of the most promising directors and designers and to bring them to your attention in an effort to infuse the field with new and exciting talent in response to your call for just that service. The fact that we launched it in the first year with a special grant from the NEA, from the chairman of the NEA, but that was a non-repeating grant. And as we wondered how we would continue the program, I was introduced to Mel by Darren Woods, and our friendship and the support of the Tobin Theater Arts Fund was launched right there. So it is with great pleasure, humility, gratitude, and great affection that I introduce you to Mel Weingart. Mel.
Thank you, Mark, and good afternoon to you all. Robert Tobin spent the major part of his life amassing one of the most prestigious and comprehensive private collections of theater art in the world, and he did so while constantly learning about this art form and with the greatest of taste and elegance. His knowledge of opera and of theater was of the highest caliber, and he lived his life with this as his primary interest. The Tobin Collection of Theater Arts is one of the most important repositories of scene and costume design in the world and is the highlight of San Antonio's McNay Art Museum. More than 10,000 preliminary sketches, final renderings, maquettes, and illustrated books in this extraordinary collection document the development of European and North American theater design from the 1500s until today. The collection showcases the rich and decorative tradition of Russian stage design, represented by Leon Bakst and Natalia Goncharova. British designs range from Edward Gordon Craig's visionary experiments with light and shadow to daring creations by Ralph Koltai. From the simplicity of Robert Edmund Jones to the postmodern fragmentation of Adrien Labelle, the collection traces distinctive stylistic contributions by U.S. designers as well. In addition, there is an extensive library of over 2,000 rare volumes, which includes costume encyclopedias as well as festival books. As Robert was amassing his collection out of the fascination with the theater, in particular the musical stage, he also pursued an educational mission. Believing that designs only come to life when used, he made the collection available to students, educators, artists, and the public through the McNay Art Museum. There was no greater champion and supporter to a scenic designer than Robert. He truly believed that all components of designing were the most worthy of art forms, and he treated all designers with the highest levels of admiration and respect. Donald Unslager and Min Cho Lee, in describing Robert, wrote, and I quote, "Robert was a friend of all people who create. His taste was broad and eclectic, and he made very few judgments based on trends, so his collection embodies a great range of work. Robert was a person who treated the work, the visual part of performing arts, theater, and opera, as a living force, not as dead objects. His collection continues to support it, to speak for it, and to bring young people into the arts." Robert passed away on April 26, 2000, almost 11 years to the day. Shortly before his death, Robert and the directors of the Tobin Theater Arts Fund undertook a project to fund the publication of a book on the history of stage design in Europe and the United States. It took 10 years to accomplish this project, and I'm very pleased to announce that the book was launched approximately 1 year ago and has become so popular that we are now in the process of doing a second printing. The book, entitled Making the Scene, is co-authored by Dr. Oscar Brockett, Margaret Mitchell, and Linda Hartberger. Unfortunately, Dr. Brockett passed away just several months ago and was at the pinnacle of the academic world in stage design. We are very confident that Robert would have been extremely proud of his work, and we hope that you all will enjoy it as well. A number of years ago, in an effort to continue carrying on part of Robert's mission, the directors of the Tobin Theater Arts Fund established an annual award in cooperation with the Theater Development Fund. This award, known as the Robert L.B. Tobin Award for Sustained Excellence in Theatrical Design, acknowledges a designer who has achieved the highest level of excellence throughout his or her career. It symbolizes Robert's passion, respect, and esteem for the art of theatrical design. The most recent recipient of this award was the prestigious designer Robin Wagner. I'm very pleased to be here today and to participate in Opera America's newest design project, which bears Robert's name, the Robert L.B. Tobin Director-Designer Showcase for Opera America. Thank you all very, very much.
Thank you, Mel. I want to add my word of thanks to Mel and the Tobin Foundation for choosing to support these artists in their creative process and helping Opera America and the field support the very lifeblood of what's on the opera stage, the makers and the doers. During the next 80 precious minutes, we will meet 4 teams who have chosen 4 American operas. They've deeply investigated and conceptualize these 4 pieces. And they're here today, chosen by a team of us, because they most clearly and dynamically articulated their collective artistic vision. It's our hope that you in the audience will see the direction in which they are pointing us and consider a production of The Hydrogen Jukebox, The Flowering Tree, Dead Man Walking, or Arjuna's Dilemma. It's also our hope that an alternative path might be taken and that you might debut one of these teams in a future season in your opera house. Because we have so much work to do, I want to get us started very quickly and to say this is the way the afternoon is going to run. Each of these teams has 20 minutes. The first 12 will be dedicated to a description, a video, a evocation of the renderings and the designs that are here. And then that will be followed by 8 minutes of questions that they will take from you. And we'll be very strict about this time because we want to make sure we hear and see everything that they have to offer. So we'll be keeping time and be watchful of that. I want to acknowledge the team that I participated with in this selection process, and 2 of whom are here today with me, Donald Eastman and Kevin Patterson. Thank you very much for your work. The first team up is the Dead Man Walking team, and it was written by Jake Hagee and Terrence McNally, and we're very fortunate to have the composer, Jake Hagee, in the audience. Please stand up, Jake. The team is led by director Justin Johnson, set designer Damon Pelletier, costume designer Haley Lieberman, and lighting designer Carl Wieman. Please welcome them to the stage.
Thank you all for coming. I would like to introduce myself. I am Justin Johnson, director of the Dead Man Walking team, and my design team, set designer Damon Pelletier, costume designer Haley Lieberman, and lighting designer Carl Wieman. A big part of working on a new work, or any work, is having the luxury in this opportunity to choose a work to do. So that becomes a really important part of the process. And in deciding from the list of works that Opera America had given us to choose from, of course, I had known a lot of Dead Men Walking and had seen several of the productions that are out there. And I thought to myself, wow, I've always wanted to know what it was like to be a Catholic nun. Right? But as time went on, I, through the, at the insistence of a very dear friend who had actually sung in the premiere, I began to realize the true beauty of the work. And I recall Sister Helen Prejean's words in a personal reflection on her first letter from Joe Desrochers, who was actually Patrick Saunier in reality, in that she said, "I abhor the evil he has done, but I sense something, some sheer and essential humanness, and that, perhaps, is what draws me." And it did. The music, I let the music wash over me and hear the words of Sister Helen in my head. And I came to realize that the work is not a grand political drama. It's not a social commentary on the death penalty or capital punishment or pro or cons either way. It is, however, the story of two people drawn together through an unimaginable circumstance. Very, very few of us in this room or in any room will ever be a Catholic nun or, heaven forbid, an inmate on death row. However, we can all, in some way, connect to a character who is under substantial duress, who is cut off from society, who is in need of redemption. And that is at the heart of this production. The reality is conceived through Sister Helen's perception. And so her perception becomes the reality of this production. From the clothes that the characters wear, to the words they say, and to the music from Maestro Heggie that washes over them, everything around them is directly influenced by and becomes a symbol of their constantly changing and transforming emotions. So, with that in mind, this was the quote that inspired our set and our concept of the physical space. This is a direct quote from Sister Helen Prejean. "It is all green and cement and bars, with too many blocked off spaces and no place for the air to circulate." And with that, I introduce Damon Pelletier, our set designer.
Hello. Let's talk about the set. So taking that previous quote into consideration, what we wanted to achieve with the set is making a clear distinction between the green and the cement and the confined spaces and the exterior world of the hot and the dense heat of the South. And then also showing the journey between those two distinctions through the proportions of the set. So what I'm going to do is briefly describe the main elements of the set, and I will just mention them now, but then I will go into detail as we see the slideshow. There's three projection surfaces which form a box as a container for the opera. There are various architectural elements that come in that, of course, represent the locations of the opera, but also sort of helps us articulate that the idea of the aperture closing in. And then lastly, there is a light shaft, which is ever present and looming over the action of the opera, and that it sort of represents the brutality and the mechanical of what is the action that's going to happen, the event that's going to happen in the end. So I'll just go through some of the major looks of the set, so I can explain further the elements of the set. This is the prologue, and here we can see the projection surfaces, and they become this warm, dense representation of the exterior world. And this moves slowly into a warmer feeling until after the murders we come to this passionate red look, and then we transition into Hope House, which also has a similar feeling. We're still in the exterior, and then after we experience the drive to Angola, we start to see the rigidity of the container as the projections of the exterior world sort of fade into the distance, and then we actually do. Once we enter Angola, we see the brutality of the space, and this is the first scene we meet the father and the warden. We have the entrance, so we start to see the weight of the architecture. And as we move further, we see the warden and Helen raise up above the prisoner, so we get the sense that we are delving deeper into the machine of the prison. And then we actually see Helen descend into that and into the visiting room, where now the container has almost been diminished completely and masked off, and we really are sort of focusing down. And also the same with the parole board hearing room, which also doubles as the waiting room, has a similar proportion. And then we get to Joseph's cell, which is the pinnacle of this sort of compression that the set provides. And also I want to mention that we see the light shaft in all of this as sort of a continuing presence. This is Sister's Helen bedroom as she is awakening from her nightmare. So we quickly throw back to the exterior world in a way. And then the execution chamber, which is similar to the rest of the prison, but it's almost this kind of eerily comfortable, soft space. But we definitely we really get a sense of the mechanics of the prison and sort of the protocol of this event. And in our version, Joseph is facing upstage, and the witness stand is facing the audience, so that we can see their reactions as the execution goes down. And then we transition after the execution into sort of this blinding light as the execution chair sort of sinks into the floor. The witnesses leave the space. The extraneous scenery goes away, and we enter a similar feeling towards the beginning that we had towards the beginning of the opera, a very open space, and Joseph on the floor with Helen above him. So that's moving on. We should move on. That's the set.
Great. Thank you, Damon. Thank you. And now Carl Wieman, our lighting designer.
Hello. So I'd like to share with you a series of research images. I'm going to try to be brief with this because we're running out of time rapidly. Essentially, I'm going to show you a series of research images that will illustrate the general aesthetic of this piece. And then I'll touch on a few different images which show lighting options for highlighting 3 different emotions if we were going to fully realize this piece. And finally, some examples of renderings, some quick renderings to show possible lighting looks. Aesthetically, the lighting for the piece is drawn on the work of the architect Ondo, who works very well with concrete. He constructs his buildings such that many vertical surfaces are lit with light grazing down walls, which would work very well with Damon's 3 tall vertical surfaces. There's this emotion of warmth and comfort that is drawn from the sisters at the beginning of the play, and I think that warmth would be adequately highlighted by contrasting the rest of the play, which in these next photos and images you can see is a cooler greenish tinge, again drawing on that quote that Justin mentioned at the top of the presentation. This is another Ondo image. You can see transitioning from the original image. I hope if the color of this projector works, you could see transitioning to a green. Going back to this image I showed earlier, which is warmth. Again, transitioning to, yeah, the color's a little messed up. But finally, I'd like to accentuate this idea of power and justice with really hard-edged lighting sources, as demonstrated in these next few images. And finally, a few renderings stepping through the first act of how the lighting might progress, especially paying attention to Damon's light shaft. In these next few images, you can see how it would gradually descend farther towards the stage, really creating a sense of isolation and confinement. These are a couple images that would illustrate a technique for shifting from a nice soft diffuse lighting beam to a hard edge lighting beam, but I'm not going to get into the technical details right now. And finally, once the light shaft is ascended fully, it actually forms the ceiling of the visiting room. And with that, I'm going to move on to costumes.
Thank you. Thank you, Carl. Haley Lieberman, costume designer.
Thank you. The costume concept is derived primarily from the deeply emotional relationship between Sister Helen and Joseph. I think so often when we read or hear the opera Dead Men Walking, we know of the transformation that Joseph undergoes through his guidance by Sister Helen. But what I'd really like to show is that both people are changed dramatically, that this relationship is in fact reciprocal. So we are out of time. I'm going to flip through this quite quickly. So one theme that I want to show is, of course, the transformation of Sister Helen. Secondly, the transformation of Joseph. And thirdly, it is very important that all of our characters are kept within a very clear color palette to differentiate between our outside world of the victims, their families, the internal world of the prison and the prison personnel, and Sister Helen, the other sisters, and Joseph. So we begin in the prologue with the two teenage victims seen naked, essentially just cloaked in this red varsity jacket. This red is the only red in the entire show. We move on to Sister Helen, who begins in this very sweet, innocent, modern habit of a jumper, so that she begins as the nun, and this journey begins she wants to help Joseph out of not only a personal obligation, but also out of a responsibility as a nun. But as we see her progress, it becomes clear that this is not only for Joseph that she's doing this, but it is also for herself. So here we have Sister Helen moving away from the nun habit into a more personal, professional look, and finally, at the finale, she is in all white, much like Joseph, as we'll see soon, representing the angel of redemption for Joseph. Then we move into the sisters, who are in a similar color palette as Helen. This is their look in Hope House, where they're wearing knits. It all feels very warm, very comforting. Then when they're at the prison, they're in a more professional, suit-like costume. Father Grenville bridging the gap between our nun world, the Hope House, and also, as we'll see here, the very gray, stark, sleek world of the prison personnel, as displayed in the guards and the warden. Now we get to Joe. Joe's costume can be a bit tricky because, of course, he is in a uniform, the prison jumper. He begins completely buttoned up, shirt sleeves and all. We don't see any of his tattoos. But as he becomes more comfortable with the relationship between himself and Sister Helen, and as he becomes more responsive to her guidance and towards his own confession, he starts to open up, he cuts off his shirt sleeves, and then finally in his execution, although it would be performed through lethal injection, I was inspired by what prisoners would look like if they were executed through electrocution, which would mean that their bodies would be shaved. We would actually see that happening, head and all. So he's wearing sort of as little as possible. The families, Joe's mother and her sons, they are in what is nearly inappropriate for prison, but they are definitely the face of misunderstood poverty. By the time we see them in the execution, they are wearing their best suits. The suits are too small. They don't quite fit right. We need to move on. The families are in this exterior color palette, and finally, we end again with the look of the victims.
Great.
Thank you.
Thank you, Haley. Okay, thank you. We have just a few more. We have just a few moments for questions. We're just a few minutes over. Any questions? Everybody's shy today. Yes.
Yes, the scene of Sister Helen's drive to Angola.
Yes.
I didn't see that in the scenery.
Well, as a good question. I'm of the mind that since the world is seen through the perception of Sister Helen, I feel in a way it's more powerful to not see her driving by in a cutout car. It is a fairly long scene. However, through the scenic elements that are existing with the changes of mood and style through the projections. I think that it's more powerful to see her alone on this journey, and it, as a symbol of more of an emotional journey rather than an aesthetic journey.
What do you do with the motorcycle pop?
We will have him come on with a lighting cue, and then he will have his interaction with Sister Helen. Yes, any other questions?
Hi.
Yes, sir.
Actually, if you can speak into the microphone.
Oh, I'm sorry, yes.
Which company is this done for?
Well, this was a conceptual production. Opera America provided all the teams with a set theatrical space that was not indicative of any particular space. Yes. Yes, ma'am.
So the way the bottom looks is with the two levels. Is that created by a hydraulic system as it raises and lowers?
It is. As was indicated in the conceptual information, as Sister Helen enters the prison, we get the sense of her going down into a mechanical entity. So the stage would rise up with the prisoners being below Sister Helen. And then as she continues through that journey, they would lower back down to a flat surface. And then the waiting room, the interview room would come in on top of them.
Yeah. And how technically would that be done? And how could it be done with theaters with no hydraulics?
Well, again, that's a great question. Now, of course, we, in our minds, were able to use any technical specifications we would like. So in our heads, we would use a mechanical lift to create this. However, in a theater with no lift, it would be certainly possible to create those rolling in from a wing space and have the same lift from the back, and it could be accomplished with stairs. Yes. Any other questions?
In terms of Sister Helen's progression, costume-wise,
yes.
Is it your intention to say that her emotional journey brings her away from the life of a nun? And if it isn't, are you concerned that that's the story that some audience members might see in that costume progression?
Well, I wouldn't say that I'm concerned, but in light of the events of Vatican II, of course, nuns are not required to wear habits, and the actual Sister Helen has very specific opinions of not wearing a habit. So our intent was to show her in this sort of modern habit that immediately identifies her as a sister of St. Joseph. However, as she moves beyond her religious obligation to assist Joe and the poor, we want to concentrate on her personal connection to Joe, and so we sort of move away from that specific identification as a sister of St. Joseph. Yes. Any other questions? How are we on time?
You're on time.
Okay, fantastic. Thank you all. I appreciate your support. Okay.
Good work. Congratulations.
Thank you.
Good work. Thank you. We can shut that light off.
Yes. Now, I wonder if Brett needs this cord.
Well, let's put it right here.
Okay, and I'll just be sure to connect it
Yeah.
afterwards. Do you want to
Okay.
do that? Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. There's time afterwards. There'll be a little reception, and you can go around and you can ask all the questions you want at that time as well. Moving right along, the next team is from Arjuna's Dilemma, written by Douglas Cuomo, which I think Doug is also in the audience. If you'd stand, Doug. This team is led by director and set designer Gianmarco Laforte, and he's joined by costume designer Angela Wendt and lighting and projection designer Rocco DeSanti, and art maker and production supervisor, I guess, Mark Tambella.
Thank you very much. We're very, very happy to be here. My name is Gianmarco Laforte, and I have a theater company called Pioneers Go East, which we do theater projects with music, and we are based at La Mama TC in New York City. And we have worked as a team on other productions as well. It was really amazing for us and delightful to work on this opera. It's a beautiful opera which tells the story of the prince warrior Arjuna. He's from the Pandavas family, and he is in war against the Kauravas family. These two families are related, and they're in this great civil war. Now, at the eve of the last battle, Arjuna finds himself unable to proceed to battle. he understands that if he goes to battle, he will kill his own family. But he must continue his duty as a warrior and as a leader of his own army. So he must continue. The beautiful music of Maestro Douglas Cuomo inspired us tremendously. It combines some beautiful elements, which are Indian classic music, like raga. Some of the sections are actually with wordless. They have sounds that are creating meditative states of mind. They combine as well classic Western music forms, classic opera, which is sung in English. Specific, we'll see some sections, we'll hear some section sung by the chorus, which represent at times Arjuna, our hero, our character, and other times will represent Krishna, the god Krishna, that arrives and leads Arjuna. In addition to this, we have some beautiful music passages that are done with jazz, with sax jazz, and other instruments. So combining all of these elements to tell the story for an audience here for us today, this Indian myth, we really felt strongly of including, reflecting these elements in our visual world. So what we are integrating is some of the shadow play masks and puppetry elements from Indonesian inspiration and Indian inspiration. We are including a dance form, which is an Indian dance form, called Bharatanatyam, and we'll see a video about that very shortly. And we are reflecting some of the rituals and some of the allegory that are within the Bhagavad Gita, this beautiful Hindu scripture that Arjuna's dilemma is based on. In addition to this, we're merging this with a contemporary world, contemporary clothing. We are using physical expression, especially for the dancer that will interpret Arjuna on stage. We're using a contemporary psychology that we can reflect on, that we can refer to as we can understand him in his struggle. So what I would say is quickly go to some of the video. So talking about our lighting designer and projection designer, Rocco, will actually cue us. So what we'll see here will be first a video, which is the top of the opera, the beginning of the opera, and it's called Alap. This section is sung in Sanskrit by Krishna, the singer Krishna. And what we did, we have our choreographer, Philip Montana, in this video, who is recreating through movement, through the Bharatanatyam movement, he's recreating some of the different infinite names that Krishna calls himself. Again, Krishna is the God. In addition to this, immediately after, we'll see a little section of the interview to Philip and how we created the character for Krishna.
So what I've decided to do with the movement is create many gestures based on Bharatanatyam gestures that take different aspects. They have sort of like the lion and the flower and the rock. So it takes all the faces of Krishna and all the different ways it can be embodied through the world and through our body. And then what I've done on top of that then is layered all of the movement that's in my body. So I've taken contemporary movement, placed it on top of traditional Bharatanatyam dancing, and gone ahead and created a persona for Krishna in today.
Great. So we want to now create, we want to talk more specifically about how we are developing this project. We are building this as a dance opera. We are specifically referring to theatrical musical form from 16th century Italian, which is called commedia armonica. In this form of theatrical form, we have the singers and the musicians that are on the side of the stage performing and singing, and throughout the space we have then dancers, additional actors who are reinterpreting the lines, or interpreting the music throughout their body, throughout the gesture, and throughout their expression. So we are basically doubling our cast by being able then to integrate these characters. So what we're doing is, if we have Arjuna, our singer, in concert form, then we'll have a dancer who is recreating some of the Bharatanatyam movement on stage. As well, we'll do the same with Krishna. Specifically, we're integrating even the armies. This is such a crucial part of the project. We are in the middle of a battlefield right now. So what needs to happen is that we need to recreate the strength of the armies arriving, gathering, and coming forward just before the war is about to start. So we'll have warriors, and you're going to see them here. And in this representation, we have them in silhouette. And if you go to the next image, we slowly can see how they flesh out. And we see they're wearing contemporary clothing, military boots, and they are wearing headpieces which are inspired by Indian and Indonesian shadow puppetry. And these are representing the filigree of branches. So we see then our character Arjuna isolated coming forward, and slowly we can move to the next section, which is Top My Chariot. If we have some of the music, we can actually hear it more. So this engrossing moment, it's a moment in which Arjuna is with his charioteer, Krishna. He is asking Krishna to stop the chariot because he needs to be able to see his opponents. He wants to see the faces of his opponents. There he realizes that he sees his cousins, his uncles, in the opposed army. He realizes that if he goes to war, he will kill them, that there will be destruction by attaining his duty. We have Krishna, the character of Krishna, the god, dressed with a mask, which is again always coming back from the Indian and Indonesian shadow puppetry. He will have a horse. He will hold the horse and the reins and pull it on stage. He will tell Arjuna to hold the horse and to go to battle. Arjuna refuses. There's a beautiful allegory here that represents the path of Arjuna. Now, in the Bhagavad Gita and in the Mahabharata, we know that the horse represents our senses, our four senses. We know that the reins that the man is pulling represents the intellect, who we are as people. And we know that our mind is below our intellect. And we know as well that our mind cannot attain what's best for us. We cannot be on that true path in life if we don't have a life of detachment, if we don't attach ourselves from material life. So this is the main allegory in the story as well, which is not only him going to battle, but as well it's about the allegory for your life. What is your path in life? So this is really Arjuna's life and story reflects everyone's life. And this is the power, universal power of this story. So we can move on to the next section. So the structure of the opera, it's in 3 sections. The first section where we are in right now, it's called the dilemma. The second section, which we're seeing right now, it's called the answer. We can raise some of the music. In this section, we hear Arjuna and Krishna. Arjuna is asking Krishna to tell him why he must kill his own kinsmen, why he needs to go to battle with them. And Krishna will reply with them in a joyful way, always using Sanskrit. And this back and forth goes, it goes on for a long time in the opera, and until there's a breaking moment, and that's the next slide, in which Krishna and Arjuna will talk to each other using no words, just sounds, pure sounds. And this is the power of the opera, which is the moment of meditation. As we see at this point, ritualistically, Arjuna has taken off his headpiece. His bow has slipped from his arm. He's now a warrior. He's vulnerable. He's showing us who he is. Slowly, we see here we are in the third section of the opera, which is called the Vision. At this point, there's a breakthrough moment. Arjuna is convinced, but he wants to see more Krishna. He wants to understand who Krishna is in his infinite versions. We know Krishna is the God. So slowly, if you hear the strings, our idea to actually bring impersonifications of Krishna on stage while we hear these string sections. And we hear the music and the chorus is singing of the different variation of Krishna. Krishna is in the sky, he is the moon. He is, of all beasts, he is the lion. So we're bringing the different Krishna to represent this on stage. So we're moving then to the next section, which is actually the transformation section. In this section, we have a crowd of Krishna arriving on stage. So one by one, they're going to overwhelm Arjuna. Arjuna will be in the middle, but he will not be able to distinguish who's who. And this is one of the other main meanings of the opera, which is to reflect on who we are, not as individuals, but as a collective. The needs of the collective are more important than our own human, selfish individuality. And that's really one of the other teachings that Krishna gives to Arjuna. And this is how we're going to resolve it visually. We're now moving to the very last section of the vision, and we have a video for this. We just see right now one of the images, and now we'll see a video. Wait a second. In this section, we are inspired by Escher drawings of the infinite staircases, in which they're all interlocked, and we realize that the gravity changes for everyone, and the multidimension of Krishna will be represented in this video.
Antaratma dritim navinder min shamancha Vishnu kommst vakaralani jate makone ne dristva sono già nell'alabe
So we're now at the end of this path, of spiritual path that Arjuna has gone into. Now we are at the very end in the epilogue and the postlude. Arjuna will take up his arms, his bow and arrow on fire. He will go back in the battlefield. Slowly we see the army arriving from upstage. They will go forward, and the cycle of life is completed. And we continue. So now the opera is over, the visuals are finished, and we would love to hear some of your questions.
Take about 3 minutes of questions.
Okay.
Beautiful, beautiful
Hi,
job. From one costume designer to another, I'm just curious, are the model figures, I noticed that they certainly have a photographic quality to them. Are they representative of the costumes, or are they symbolic of the costumes, or are those the costumes that we'd actually be seeing in the production?
They more symbolic But definitely, mostly the element of contemporary clothes. So it's really people that we recognize, like the dilemma being something very contemporary still for many people, going to war against people, your family, with traditional elements. As in the chorus has, the women have suits on, but they're made out of sari fabric.
Right.
Things like that.
Beautiful, thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Hi. I'm curious about the level of interaction between the principal singers and the dancers who are portraying their characters. If your intention is for the singers to simply be part of the orchestral fabric of the piece, rather than actually portraying the characters if they're going to be appearing on the stage, mixing in. Could you speak to that a little bit more?
Of course. Can you hear me? Yes. Okay, I'll be here. Thank you for the question. So definitely for the way we're integrating, the piece for us really starts visually, but somehow it builds in the answer section, at least the way we're exploring right now, it builds into more of a concert section. So it would be interesting to feature Arjuna and Krishna singers with isolation, with lighting that specifically goes with them, but really just like this back and forth is just about these two voices. Now to talk about what you asked as well, I would not see a lot of interaction except the chorus. The chorus when they were presenting Arjuna. They would probably come closer to Arjuna and kind of create architectural elements around him. Is that okay? Thank you. Are we done?
Good.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Again, you can ask your questions any remaining questions in the reception following. Next up is Hydrogen Jukebox by Philip Glass and Allen Ginsberg, and represented by director Rafael Gallegos and set and lighting designer Brett Banakis.
Thank you, Diane, and thank you to the Tobin Foundation and to Opera America. Thanks, Lindsay and Megan, for giving us the opportunity to be here with you. My name is Rafael Gallegos. This is Brett Banakis, and on behalf of our colleague Sydney Maresca, thank you for having us. America is dying. It's time to put her out of her misery. Our production of Philip Glass and Allen Ginsberg's Hydrogen Jukebox takes the form of a stage poem mourning the death of the myth of America. Allen Ginsberg was the face of the counterculture revolution. We're having a little difficulty here. Stay tuned. Beat poet, representative of okay. He was an iconoclast. He was lashing out against post-World War II America. The man in the gray flannel suit. Allen Ginsberg was the exact opposite of this. Philip Glass, as we all know, and no matter what our opinion of his music, we know that he's reshaping the way we think about music, and particularly music in performance.
This one right here is what the other one was hooked up to. No, it's not going to do it. Sorry.
We'll just pause, please. This was all planned, of course. Now, Glass was really interested, as we know, in writing music theater events that address social issues. And Glass found in Ginsberg an ideal collaborator. Here we are. This is our text. You know, Glass described Ginsberg's work as inventing a poetic language from the sounds and the rhythms all around us. The fuzz, the snow. This is only mildly embarrassing. So, you know, Glass, known for his portraits of historical figures, Mahatma Gandhi, Albert Einstein. He has these expansive and multifaceted operatic portraits. They're non-linear, non-narrative, challenging. And with that in mind, I'm going to vamp some more. I'll be here all night. Check me on Twitter, @Rafael Gallegos. #HydroJuke. You can follow along. Sure. This is a fantastic story, actually. Allen Ginsberg and Philip Glass, you know, ran in the same circles. Glass was doing a benefit, late 80s, 89, was asked to make a music piece. Brett, what was the...
Glass was at...
Let him do it. I'll answer. So, St. Mark's Bookstore, Allen Ginsberg and Glass just happened to run into each other. Alan, how are you? Philip, what are you working on? Well, I'm doing a music theater piece. I would love some text. Ginsberg reaches to the poetry section, pulls out the collected works of Allen Ginsberg and says, you might want to look at this poem, Wichita Vortex Sutra, which we feel is really the linchpin of this opera. So this piece started out actually as a
single song,
one song,
and an evening of performance as part of a benefit. And after that one night, Allen Ginsberg read his poem aloud, and Philip Glass played piano along with it. That performance was very well received, and they decided to.
Hey, there they are.
I'm going to go in our slideshow from over there.
So this is not a traditional opera. There's no characters, no settings. There's no narrative. It's simply Allen's poems and Philip's music. We, as a team, were challenged to devise a music theater event to complement this collaboration, and we're about ready. Maestro. All right. So it was very challenging to kind of devise our own language of performance and imagery to complement this collaboration. We really wanted to take up their cause to make mantra of American language now, responding to the music and the poetry and the layering of the biography of Ginsberg and the inherent critique in Hydrogen Jukebox. We draw on many different sources of inspiration. We look to the Tibetan Book of the Dead as a source. The text written, spoken to the dying and the interval between death and rebirth. The narrative, the Beat Generation, moments in Ginsberg's life as well as our own life. Every war that's ever happened. the human experience and the human condition in 2011. So our Hydrogen Jukebox, we seek to layer these sources together into a theatrical event that's America now. And all our characters are Americans in transition. They're awaiting their next moment of connection in life, in death, in self, or in others. We've chosen to set Hydrogen Jukebox in a place of passage from one world to the next, a liminal place that is neither here nor there. A man with a rolling suitcase at the top of the show awaits his departure. Emerging from what looks like a convenience store, the cold, fluorescent, flickering lights make out the space as he sings lightning's blue glare. Light builds and we begin to make out the shape of the space. Maybe it's a gas station or a pharmacy, a municipal facility. We see bathrooms, a TV screen. A man digs a hole enigmatically, possibly fixing some floor tiles or doing some electrical work, mining for gold, or even digging to China. He digs throughout the act tirelessly to no end, a constant image of a man at work. We can make out a mural of a public art mural done by a group of young art students. A man in a rocking chair sits and watches the world pass by, just like he would do in his porch in Kansas. We see several Americans littered around the space and engaged in mindless, mundane activity. A woman compares prices for two items that need no comparison. Another woman, buried in her iPhone, concerned more with her digital persona than her offline one. She constantly takes profile pics of herself, updating her digital persona. An older woman wanders around the stage in her hospital gown. Maybe she's looking for a doctor. Maybe she's trying to find her way home. She shuffles about, an empty shell of her once vibrant self. A man loses his change in the vending machine. A piece of glass separates him from his Snickers bar. His own personal tragedy. The worker keeps digging. These Americans are in the same literal space, but they could not be further apart from one another. They do not engage one another, but they sing in distant unison, "Who's the enemy?" Year after year, war after war, who's the enemy? A news report flashes on the TV during the song, Yahweh and Allah battle. Stay tuned, the president will make a very important announcement. Shocked, the Americans fearfully await the impending news, but the TV cuts to commercial. Toilet paper, car insurance, life-enhancing pharmaceuticals. Fed up, one by one, the Americans change the channel, randomly arriving on the Home Shopping Network. Putrid barrage of close-ups of jewelry and various convenience items for the home. No longer watching in fear, everyone ignores the television, but the images of commerce remain flickering, and the working man keeps digging. By now, we've noticed that stanchions have been set up where inexplicably the Americans began to stand in line, as though they're waiting for their number to be called at the pharmacy or renewing their license at the DMV. At this point in the music, we hear the song Under Silver Wing from the poem Crossing the Nation, which conjures up images of travel. Within this context, the cue might seem like a rest stop at a highway junction, or maybe they're at an airport. TSA security officers enter with a walk-through metal detector, and one by one start to screen the anxious Americans. The agents wave the first American through the metal detector, unsatisfied. They force him to take off his shoes and his belt. Still unsatisfied, one agent begins to screen the American manually with a handheld wand. Even more humiliating, the TSA agent makes the American remove every article of clothing until he's stripped of all dignity, like a soldier on the first day of boot camp or a prisoner sentenced to a life in exile. Hysterical, naked, each American endures this humiliating ordeal. Even the old woman is not exempt from this treatment. Witnessing the whole performance of security is the old man in the rocking chair who hasn't moved the entire opera. And fed up with the nonsense, he stands up, walks over to the television. Unable to find the button, he puts on his glasses and switches off the TV. And when he turns downstage, he becomes Allen Ginsberg, complete with iconic horn-rimmed glasses and scruffy beard. Allen begins, "I'm an old man now and a lonesome man in Kansas," from his poem Wichita Vortex Sutra, centerpiece of Hydrogen Jukebox. In this incantation, Allen describes driving alone in the automobile through the vast plains of Kansas. And in a celebration of humanity, he calls all powers of imagination and all the gods and all mankind that ever existed to his side in this moment, to this spot, to declare an end to all war now. And one by one, each American transforms into a god when Allen places a simple paper Burger King crown on each of their heads. No longer humiliated, they celebrate their freedom without the constraint of worldly possessions or obsessions. Ginsberg and his brethren celebrate their declaration to end all war. Satisfied with his work, Allen returns to his rocking chair, inviting us to stop for tea and gas. And we take an intermission. We'll plow through Act 2 here. When we begin Act 2, we're in the same space, but there's a shift in perspective. And all the Americans are on stage, visibly affected by Ginsberg's words, yet nothing seems to have changed. But now, looming outside the space is the red tail of a Boeing 777. The public art mural now has more gravity. The stage left panel depicts airplanes in flight, and the stage right panel, two tall buildings. A red axe encased in glass, brake in case of emergency. We see a row of carefully manicured indoor trees, between them more white rocking chairs. Back in their clothes, the Americans completely miss the point as they start off on a destructive path, vandalizing the space, throwing the chairs around, graffitiing Allen Ginsberg's face on the wall. An old woman collapses in pain, and two EMTs arrive with her stretcher to administer first aid. Doctor enters, and a young man is faced with the decision to sign some documents authorizing a procedure for the old woman. This is a direct reference to Ginsberg's biography, where he was forced to authorize the lobotomy for his own mother. He begins the song Aunt Rose as they take the old woman off stage on the gurney, but she reappears upstage as if in a memory, joined by two other women, each dressed like her. These three Aunt Roses slowly limp across the people mover in the lopsided 5/8 rhythm of Glass's music. A young man is snapped out of his memory when two Americans burst on stage in a hijacked airport courtesy cart, beginning the song Green Automobile. And the whole gang revels in a subversive, debauchery-laden party that references the sexual revolution of the 60s and drug counterculture. They have a post-coital marijuana cigarette as the sun sets, interrupted by police with bright flashlights breaking up the party. During the song CIA Dope Calypso, policemen physically restrain the merry band of pranksters and handcuff them one by one to the trees, an image of imprisonment as well as civil disobedience. With all her might, a woman stage left drags her tree planter to the axe on the wall, breaks the emergency glass, and starts to cut down her tree, in time with the tick-tock woodblock of Nagasaki days. After the tree falls, she hands her axe to the neighbor, cutting down his tree. This deforestation continues until all the trees have fallen and all the Americans are free. But through this act of selfishness, they have obliterated all other life on stage, including old man Ginsberg, left now a lifeless heap on the ground. The Americans gather around the spot where he died in reverence, ashamed of their misguided actions. Meanwhile, the old man begins the process of rebirth. In an act of ceremony, he hands each mourning American a gift, a set of horn-rimmed glasses and a fake beard. He wanders off into the light, proclaiming, Out, out into the Buddha fields, among the stars, to wander forever, weightless, without a headline, without thought, without newspapers to read by the light of the galaxies. The sun starts to peek over the horizon, and we slowly make out the Americans' faces, who have now all become Allen Ginsberg, each with a beard and glasses, embodying his resurrected spirit. A cappella, they sing Father Death Blues, the poem that Allen wrote on his journey to his own father's funeral. The mourning Americans walk over to the enigmatic hole that's been there the entire opera and give Ginsberg a proper burial. They place their glasses and beards into the hole and resume their lives all the better for it. Thank you very much. So we just have a couple moments. So I mean,
You have a couple moments, so if anyone has a question.
We lost some time in the beginning.
Brett Benakis.
I remember seeing one of there was a tour of this originally. It premiered, I don't know where, but then it made a major tour of.
It was BAM, yeah.
Excuse me?
Did it premiered at BAM, then went to?
Yeah, I think if it did, then it did, and it was basically an ensemble of 6. And I remember seeing it, and it's basically an oratorio. But the 6 singers spent their whole time listening to each other and looking at the conductor. How is it your intent that the people on stage would actually be the singers, or are you thinking that the singers are in the pit listening to each other, looking at the conductor, and these are actors who are on stage performing all these actions?
No, I'm sorry if that wasn't clear. Each character on stage is a singer. We do have 2 supers who play TSA agents or the EMTs, but they're two sopranos, a mezzo, a tenor, baritone, and bass. They definitely have to see the conductor, though. This is challenging timing.
I mean, what's fascinating about your concept is it all is based in real activity, which we all find interesting and satisfying. Someone with their back to us picking out a candy bar, someone chopping down a tree. So I just wonder how that communication between them, each other, and the composer is actually possible.
Well, maybe
even though your story is fascinating.
Act 1 versus Act 2?
Well, I mean, the hope is that a lot of these things can actually happen with the singers on stage. I mean, I don't exactly know what, during which, I mean, if it's every single moment, we have charted out sort of when people are on stage and when people aren't singing, and we've tried to put a lot of the heavy action in areas where they're not, singing a lot of difficult parts. But also, I do think we have structured a lot of the action around sort of mundane activity. That is the sort of 21st century existence that we have now. And I think a lot of that can hopefully be sung while doing those things.
We were very interested in having them actually do things, though. Things that an American would be doing, checking your iPhone, and then kind of exaggerating this and really accentuating the fact that they're in the same space, but they're not communicating. No one is talking. Any other? Thank you for your question.
Thanks. So you talked about the syncing up the axe chopping with the woodblock sound. I'm wondering if there's other moments where the action connects with the orchestral score, or if you're envisioning it, like trees falling is a considerable sound effect when it happens, if you're also considering the effect of additional sound in the space as part of your storytelling.
Well, of course we wouldn't want to do anything that's not in the score. But no, actually I think we're very interested in this dissonance, in contrast here. Not syncing up, actually, purposely going against the grain here of what's happening in the score and resisting that.
But there are moments like the chopping where I think we really do want to emphasize what's happening in the score. At the top of that piece, it's a very distinct woodblock sound that would, I think, work well on stage with that moment.
Thank you so much.
You.
And last but certainly not least, the group from A Flowering Tree by John Adams and Peter Sellers. Director Austin McCormick, set and costume designer Zane Pilstrom, lighting designer Gina Scheer, and choreographer Hari Krishnan.
Hi, I'm Austin McCormick, and we're very happy to be here. Thank you to Opera America and to the Tobin Theater Arts Fund for this amazing opportunity to develop our work. We're going to start by playing a video. One of our collaborators isn't here, Gina Scheer, the lighting designer, so you'll see her talk a bit on the video. So let's roll it. My name's Austin McCormick. I'm the director of A Flowering Tree, and I'm also the founder of Company 14. We're a mixed media dance theater company based in Brooklyn, New York. Our artistic mission is to unite the mediums of dance, theater, and music to reimagine classical narratives. A Flowering Tree is a great project for us because the opera is based on a 2,000-year-old Indian folktale with music by a contemporary composer. So it allows us the freedom to fuse the antique with the contemporary.
I know that I can relate to the flowering tree. There are many beautiful things that I've seen in my life that I wish that I could have for myself, and that is the main conflict that everyone in the show has to deal with.
The narrative of the opera deals with classical themes of love, betrayal, transformation, objectification, mistaken identity, and ultimately forgiveness.
I really respond to the magic and beauty of this opera, born from a folk story about a woman who can turn herself into a flowering tree.
A young, poor woman named Kamuda discovers she has the ability to transform into a beautiful flowering tree. The prince demands her hand in marriage, and she's subsequently exploited by members of the court. They abuse her, breaking her branches mid-transformation, leaving her half tree, half woman. She leaves the court in shame until the prince finds her and brings her back to court, where she is able to complete the transformation, and she's restored to her human form. So what do you imagine, like, palette-wise in terms of the tree transformation?
I think for the tree transformation, I want to stick with all those really vivid sort of Indian colors like fuchsia and gold and things like that. So we build a really strong contrast between all of those magical moments and then all the moments of the rest of the play.
It's nice because it could be really natural plus like colorful, and we don't have any color really in the court world.
Yeah.
In this production, we want to emphasize the difference in the two worlds, the stark urban institution of the court and the beauty of the natural world, the truth and beauty. For the lighting, this means playing up the starkness of the court. No color, no warmth, just cold, harsh environments. And in the natural world, we've referenced the northern lights as an influence in the work. And I think that will be a challenge to convey the beauty of the northern lights within the confines of the theater, but it's certainly going to be an interesting challenge.
So this is an example of the world of the play being the stark, cold, urban setting with the contrast of the tree, natural and warm.
And do you feel like there's a moment for projection in this scene? Like, what do you feel like would be?
I think the only moment for projection is when we use the silk, which is only for the tree, like the actual transformation.
Yeah. We've imagined Kamuda's transformations as a combination of dance and projected imagery based on themes of natural metamorphosis. We hope to create an emotional experience for the audience by introducing rich color and lush movement for the first time.
I think the key to doing this well is that the transformation has to be so beautiful that the audience understands why the characters in the play want to control her power. I want to use this sheer silk chiffon billowing upstage, and I think the whole effect sort of builds. We add more panels downstage, all moving in the same direction. And then we use this stage filled with flowing fabric to mask bringing downstage a real three-dimensional tree. All the while we are using video projection to add another layer of depth to the effect.
The main lighting challenge will, of course, come with the negotiation of the projection and the lighting, as always. But both will convey the tone of the piece, and it will just be a collaboration between all of the people working on the production to see what we want to see and when we want to see it, and will the projections be carrying that, or will the light be carrying that, or how they will be carrying that together.
Hari Krishnan's unique choreographic style fuses traditional Indian dance with contemporary movement. His choreography will further heighten the contrast between these two worlds. Dance will be used in a very integrated way to create the physical and emotional landscapes in the show.
I'm really inspired by Hari's unique choreography, and I want the dancers' clothes to be inspired by classical Indian dance, but to have elements of urban street culture about them as well. I found this great artist, Thomas Lang. He does these half-human, half-organic sculptures. They have this very gnarled and violent look about them. In the opera, Kamunda is left in this half-stump, half-human form. I think this sculptor's work is a perfect jumping-off point for building a mask and maybe some sort of body armor for Kamunda. The biggest thing to watch out for in staging the opera is that the transformation occurs multiple times, and we don't want to grow bored with the same magic trick. So I think we have to find variations on restaging Kamunda transforming into the tree.
So our basic artistic mission in conceptualizing and reimagining a flowering tree is to unite strong design, avant-garde fusion choreography, and video projection to create an edgy urban world that a younger generation of opera goers can hopefully relate to. My background is in Baroque court dance and classical ballet. After I graduated from Juilliard, I started a dance theater company based in New York in order to explore abstractions within historical dance and theater. Part of what I'm bringing to the table as a director of this piece is training in something called the lucid body technique. I'm sorry, am I screaming? Okay. It's called the lucid body technique, and it's based on the 7 chakras in the body. It's a way of building character and developing characters through those emotional centers. So I found it to be very successful in building characters with dancers and singers. So, for example, in our opera, the prince character might be developing his character from an exploded 3rd chakra, which is ego, and Kamunda might be developing her character from an exploded 2nd chakra, which is the need to nurture. It's just a way in to coaching and physicalizing characters in a new way. And so when I heard the score by John Adams, I immediately thought of Hari Krishnan's unique fusion choreography. He does just incredible work, and he'll talk a bit about that. Thank you.
Furthering, can you hear me? Furthering Austin's vision of creating this new world, I'm always of the opinion of not having a simultaneous juxtaposition of 2 very different dance styles. For example, contemporary movement with classical Indian dance. Rather, I'm interested to engage them and to fuse them and to create a new hybrid world. And in this new world becomes a springboard to launch a whole new universe. And that's where I see the kind of choreographic sensibility which will hopefully further the story in this particular production. I myself I've worked with multi-ethnicity of different dances over the years, and I'm also a dance academic. I'm a professor of dance at Wesleyan University. So with my work and my choreography and my academia, I bring a strong critical perspective as seeing classical Indian dance is not as a kind of a museum piece, but as a kind of new modern rupture in the history of the form. So with the flowering tree, I see not seeing west and east as a kind of separate binary, but creating almost a new language with the choreographic sensibility and creating nooks and crevices, which the wonderful music alludes to see where the classical Indian dance landscape can function in new worlds and how they engage with the body and with the music and with the visual design. Thank you.
As Austin and Harry said, that we're setting the flowering tree in a contemporary artificial man-made world. And in this world, we need the royalty to be completely materialistic. I really want to push that, especially with the young queen and her crowd. That's the first slide. But also with the general chorus. I think anything we can do to set up a strong contrast between the urban, materialistic world and the natural beauty of nature, which is Kamundra's transformation into the tree, will make the piece stronger and the story clearer. The narrator in the opera, I see him as this wise leader in the community who is inviting the cast to play these various roles, and I think his goal is to teach us all, through his fairy tale, the messages of the opera, one of which love should and can transcend physical beauty. I think it should feel like the singers playing the prince and Kamunda are chosen or volunteer to play these roles. This is a sketch of the young lovers. It's an example of how in our opera the prince is not dressed as a prince, but as an urban youth who plays the character of prince. I think I'd want to work very closely with the singers to develop an urban look that's not too foreign to who they really are. The goal of that being that we would be able to create a very honest design, that these are real people telling us this fantastic story, and maybe that the story is much bigger than we are. These are the sketches of Kamunda's sisters who harvest her beautiful branches and sell them in the marketplace to earn money for their ailing mother. And lastly, these are the transformation dancers, which is really where we start to have fun. We're interested in combining traditional Indian dance costumes with urban street culture, and then also experimenting with this colorful powder, which is used in festivals all over India. I like the magical and romantic quality of the powder, and I think it would help to transform the tree from Kamunda into the tree. So that's our proposal, and we'd love to invite your questions. All right. Let's do it.
Hi. I actually have the same question for you, since dance is obviously such a key element in your production proposal. So how do you see the principal artists who are singing the three roles, the storyteller, the Kamuda, and the prince, relating to the dancers? Are the dancers? How many dancers are you using? Are the dancers a separate element that come in and create the magical transformations and then they're off? How are you integrating the actual human beings who are dancers with the human beings who are singing these roles?
So Hari and I have talked a lot about integrating the dancers into the chorus of the show so that they're really creating the landscapes, like the marketplace, for example. And I think originally it was done with only 3 dancers. So we're looking at, in our dream, 12 dancers in the mixed into the chorus. So does that make sense? And to really
Virus database has been up.
Thank you. To use the physicality of the dancers to create the landscapes of the show. I think that's something we're very passionate about, coming from physical theater, is that we're not necessarily always flying in scenery to depict a change in the setting of the opera, but we're really changing the physicality.
But the singer singing Kamuda and the singer singing the Prince, for example, do you see them dancing or having a dance vocabulary of movement as they are being the characters who are relating to Kamuda and her sisters, the princess and all of these other, the princess who becomes the queen?
Absolutely.
All of that?
Yes, for sure. And that's something that the Lucid Body and Hari's work, they really unite in that way, that we can find movement that is both pedestrian and heightened.
How does the fact that Kamuda and the prince and the storyteller never actually talk to each other, how does that affect your staging of the piece? And then further, in Kamuda, between transformation 3 and 4 is in this hybrid state, and you talked about some sort of a bodysuit of one form or another. How does that affect her mobility on stage?
Our concept in staging is to use the chorus and the dancers as both environments, like I've said, but also as barriers and architecture. So I think that's part of what we're working into the staging, is that that's a way that the characters never interact. Not never, but rarely interact. And I think Zane can speak to the tree design. I think you have to use this one.
I think in the libretto it refers to her as sort of half stump, half human, and I think that we would probably add pieces so she's still very recognizable, but probably mobility, nothing that would hinder her from singing, but something like on a cast on her arm, or maybe something on one of her legs, something like that. Something to create the silhouette of some terrible disability, but obviously she still needs to play the role.
Hi. How do you foresee showing the transformation that happens within the prince once he and Kamuda have actually been reunited at the end of the tale, and the transformation that happens throughout the culture as a result of their reunification?
I think I have one sketch of the prince where he's a little bit more buttoned up and a little more put together, and then when he sort of goes off into the world searching for his answers and for his girlfriend, I think he slowly strips that away and becomes much more sort of depressed and distressed. And then in the end, when he reconnects with Kamuda, I think they have a wedding or sort of a ceremony, and I think he puts those clothing back on.
I would just add to that, that the theatrical device of the silk and the projection could also be combined with live feed, so that we could actually see some of the costume changes happening and being projected on the silk. And that's one of our devices to mask things, but also to show things from a different perspective, if that makes sense.
Not to be redundant, but please join me in a warm round of applause for all of these artists and their exciting work. Now, please take a closer look. And if I'm not mistaken, I think Opera America has offered us some beverages in the room as well. So while you're gazing, I think you'll be able to drink something. Thanks so much for coming. And continue to enjoy this wonderful work.